The morning smelled like rust and coming rain. It always did out here, on the edge of Calvert County, where the fields had been worked so long they seemed to breathe on their own. The auction barn was not a grand building. It never had been. But on this particular Tuesday in late October, it held more weight than any courthouse in the state, and almost nobody in that room understood why. Almost. She sat in the third row. Nora Voss, 61 years old. Hair the color of creek silt, hands that had never once been soft. She wore a canvas jacket, the shade of dried grass, and held a manila envelope across her lap the way another woman might hold a hymnal. She did not fidget. She did not look around. She simply waited, which was something she had always done better than anyone. At the front of the room, Marcus Hale stood beside a press table with a polished briefcase open beside him. He represented Meridian Agricultural Holdings, and he looked it, the kind of man who learned the word leverage before he learned the word harvest. He had already spoken to 3 county officials that morning and shaken 4 hands and smiled with all his teeth, and now he was ready to close the matter of the Voss land acquisition with the efficiency of someone stamping a document they had already written. The county assessor, a careful man named Gerald Broad, sat behind a long table at the front. He had done this for 22 years. He was not easily impressed and not easily rushed. He shuffled papers. He did not look up. Hale checked his watch. He glanced briefly at Nora Voss the way a man glances at a puddle he intends to step around. She had been pointed out to him earlier that morning by a local contractor who said, "That is the woman who fixes those old tractors." Hale had nodded without interest. The proceeding was straightforward, as far as Hale understood it. The Voss parcel, 412 acres of mixed cropland and pasture in the Southern Valley Corridor, had been assessed under a consolidated rural development provision. Meridian had made a competitive offer. The county had approved the preliminary framework. The family had made no legal objection within the standard notice window. The matter was, in Hale's estimation, finished before it began. Broad called the session to order. He read the parcel reference number. He confirmed the date. He asked if there were any parties present, withstanding to address the disposition of the land. Nora Voss set the manila envelope on her knee. She did not open it. She raised her hand. There was a small ripple of attention in the room, the kind that happens when something unexpected interrupts an expected silence. Hale did not look alarmed. He looked mildly annoyed, which is different. He leaned toward his associate and said quietly, "She is not listed as a party in the notice record." Broad looked at Nora. He said, "Please identify yourself for the proceeding." She said, "Nora Voss, the original deed holder's granddaughter. And there is a covenant attached to this land that was not included in your assessment brief." Hale's associate began typing. Hale himself straightened slightly, adjusted the cuff of his left sleeve, and breathed through his nose. He said, "For the record, all encumbrances and historical deed attachments were reviewed during the preliminary title search. Any covenant of record would have appeared in the standard chain of title examination." Nora looked at him. Just for a moment. Then she looked at Broad. She said, "This one did not appear because it was never filed through the county recorder's office. It was a private agricultural covenant, witnessed and signed by 3 parties in 1962, and it was recorded only in the original land ledger held by the Voss family estate and in the library archive of the Calvert Valley Farming Cooperative, which has not been digitized." The room was quiet. Not dramatically quiet, just the ordinary quiet of people who had been half listening and were now fully listening. Broad set down his pen. He said, "Do you have this document with you?" She said yes. Hale said, with respect to the assessor, "A 60-year-old private notation carries no legal binding in a modern disposition proceeding without court recognition." Nora said nothing. She waited for Broad to ask her to bring the document forward. When he did, she rose from the third row and walked to the front of the room, the way a person walks who has no need to hurry. To understand what she carried in that envelope, you have to go back. Not all the way to 1962, not yet. You have to go back only 11 years, to a cold March morning when Nora Voss was 50 years old and her grandfather, Edmund Voss, was dying in a back bedroom that smelled of engine grease and old almanacs. Edmund had farmed that land for 61 years. Before that, His own father had cleared the creek drainage and planted the first row of barley with hands that bled from the rocks. The land was not beautiful in the magazine sense. It was not rolling and golden and photogenic. It was low and dark and heavy with clay, and it resisted everything you tried to grow on it until you understood it. And once you understood it, it gave back in the only way hard land ever gives back, slowly, honestly, completely. Nora had come to the land sideways. She had not grown up dreaming of farming. She had grown up dreaming of engines, which her grandfather treated as a related subject. He said to her once when she was 9 years old and standing on a wooden crate to reach the carburetor of his 1954 field tractor, "A machine and a field are the same thing, Nora. Neither one lies to you. Both of them tell you exactly what is wrong." If you know how to listen, she had listened her whole life. She had listened to machines and soil and weather and her grandfather's stories, and she had become, over 40 years, a woman who fixed old tractors and managed the Voss fields quietly and without announcement while the rest of the county slowly sold itself to corporate land groups who paid in clean checks and left in clean trucks. The neighbors had opinions about Nora. They said she was peculiar. They said she kept to herself too much. They said it was a shame a woman that capable had never done anything with it. By anything, they meant something visible, something they could understand from the road. They did not see what she had been building because she had not built it loudly. In those last weeks before Edmund died, he had talked to Nora every evening about the land. Not sentimentally. He was not a sentimental man. He talked to her the way he talked to machines, specifically, practically, with details that mattered. He told her about the drainage easement along the southern fence line that had kept 3 neighboring farms from flooding in 1988. He told her about the shared water agreement with the Prell family that had never been formalized but had never been broken, and he told her about the covenant. He said, "It is in the ledger, page 47. Your great-uncle Harlan drafted it with 2 other men when the county tried to zone the valley for industrial use the first time. It says that any sale or transfer of the Voss acreage must preserve its designation as working agricultural land in perpetuity, or the full 400 acres reverts to a land trust controlled by whatever remains of the Calvert Valley Farming Cooperative." Nora had asked, why was it never filed officially? Edmund had said, because in 1962 we trusted our word more than we trusted the county recorder. And because Harlan thought a quiet covenant was harder to challenge than a public one. A man looking for a fight heads for the courthouse. He does not go looking through family ledgers. She had written down the page number. She had written down the cooperative's archive reference. She had written both things in the same worn notebook she used to track oil changes and seed rotations and the weight measurements of every grain harvest for 11 years. The notebook was in her jacket pocket right now, though she had not needed to look at it this morning. Edmund died on a Thursday in March. Nora buried him beside his wife in the far corner of the north field under a post oak that had been there longer than anyone could remember. She did not weep at the graveside. She weeded it instead, pulling the grass back from the stone with her bare hands, because that was how she had seen Edmund tend every difficult thing carefully, without fuss, until it was right. Then she went back to work. The land did not grieve with her. It kept doing what land does. It waited for spring. She planted, she harvested, she fixed what broke. She learned what the fields needed and gave it to them year after year. Not because it was profitable in any spectacular way, but because it was right. Because it was the agreement her family had made with that soil for 3 generations, and she did not intend to be the generation that broke it. She began expanding quietly, 5 years after Edmund died. Not loudly, not with loans from institutions that asked too many questions. She bought the first adjacent parcel, 18 acres, of overworked field belonging to the widowed Tenner family. For a fair price in cash she had saved over 12 years of careful management. She did not resell it. She rotated it back into production. 2 years later she bought another parcel, 41 acres this time, that had gone fallow for 3 seasons. She planted it in clover and rye the first year to recover the soil, then in a mixed grain rotation that paid back the purchase cost within 4 harvests. The people in Calvert County who noticed it all said she was just tinkering, keeping busy, playing at farming. It was a phrase that followed Nora Voss the way certain phrases follow certain people, not because it was true, but because the people saying it needed it to be. She did not correct them. She kept the books. She kept the soil records. She kept the equipment running because she understood equipment the way Edmund had taught her, not as a collection of parts, but as a system. And a system you understand will not surprise you, and a system that does not surprise you does not cost you what you cannot afford. By the time Meridian Agricultural Holdings set its attention on the Voss Valley corridor, Nora had quietly assembled 7 separate parcels under her family's land trust, totaling 903 acres of active, productive, debt-free farmland. She had done it without a press release, without a government grant, without a business partner, and without asking anyone's permission. No one in the county had understood what they were watching. Hale certainly had not. When Meridian's preliminary assessment identified the Voss parcel as the anchor acquisition for their valley development plan, his team had reviewed what the public record showed: 1 woman, 1 family parcel, and a lot of old equipment in an open shed. His analysts had written her assessed acreage as a routine acquisition target. The additional parcels were registered under a trust name that did not carry the Voss surname. They had not connected them. Parken, that was the first thing they did not know. The covenant was the second. Broad examined the document carefully. It was 2 pages long, handwritten in the precise cursive of a man who took legibility as a matter of respect. It bore 3 signatures: a notary stamp from 1962, and a cross-reference to the Calvert Valley Farming Cooperative's internal land registry, archive number CVC 1962-114. He looked up at Nora. He said, "Is the cooperative's archive copy still accessible?" She said, "I requested a certified copy from their archivist 3 weeks ago." She placed a second document on the table beside the first. Hale said the cooperative dissolved its formal charter in 1987. Any records from a dissolved entity carry no current organizational standing. Broad said, "The records themselves carry standing, Mr. Hale. Dissolution of the organization does not dissolve the historical documentation." He picked up the certified archive copy and compared it to the ledger original. He was quiet for a long moment. The room waited. Nora stood at the front with her hands loose at her sides. She was not performing patience. She simply had it. The way you have a thing you have practiced so long, it no longer feels like effort. Hale opened his briefcase. He produced a printed legal summary and said, "Even granting the covenant's validity in principle, its enforceability requires judicial review and a formal petition to the District Land Court. This proceeding cannot be paused on the basis of an unreviewed historical document." Broad said, "It can be paused on the basis of a material encumbrance that was not disclosed in the assessment brief, which is exactly what this appears to be." He set both documents side by side. He said, "I am suspending the disposition record pending a title review, that is, within the assessor's discretionary authority under the County Procedural Code." Hale said, "With respect, Gerald, this is a significant delay to a multi-county development initiative with existing financial commitments. We are talking about inconveniencing an organization of considerable size over a document that has not seen the light of day in 60 years. Broad said, "Documents do not lose their meaning in the dark, Mr. Hale." He did not say it harshly. He said it the way a man says something he has thought about before and chosen to believe. The room made a sound. Then, not applause, not laughter. Just a collective exhale that was something close to recognition. Hale straightened his papers. He turned partially away from the table and spoke more quietly now, in the manner of a man shifting strategies without appearing to shift strategies. He said to Nora directly and for the first time, as though she were actually a party to a conversation rather than an obstacle in a corridor, "I think there is a productive path here that serves everyone. Meridian's development proposal does include an agricultural preservation component. We would be willing to structure a premium acquisition offer with a working farm rider that preserves active cultivation on a percentage of the acreage." Nora looked at him. She said, "Which percentage?" He said, We could discuss something in the range of 30 to 40%. She said, the covenant requires 100%. He said, the covenant is 60 years old. She said, the land is older than that. Hale looked at her for a moment the way people look when they are recalculating. Something they assumed was already calculated. He said, this covenant would need to survive a district court challenge to have any real force. We have legal resources that can address this thoroughly. I am trying to offer you something practical rather than a long and expensive dispute. Nora said, I have been managing this land for 30 years, Mr. Hale. I have the time. He said nothing to that. There was not much to say. What happened next did not happen in that room. It happened over the following 6 weeks, in the Calvert District Land Court, in the County Recorder's Office, and in the reading room of the Regional Agricultural Archive, where a methodical clerk named Sylvia Okafor spent 4 days verifying the chain of custody for both the Voss ledger and the cooperative's original document. Okafor was the kind of person who treated accuracy as a moral obligation, and she found what she found without commentary or apology. The covenant was valid. More than that, it was binding, because it had been drafted with a land reversion clause, not a simple use restriction. The practical consequence was that any transfer in violation of its terms would trigger automatic reversion of the original 412 acres to the cooperative's successor trust, which Nora had quietly reestablished as a legal entity. After she first heard the name Meridian spoken at a county planning board meeting she had attended alone. That was the detail none of Hale's analysts had found. She had known they were coming for 14 months. She had prepared for 14 months, not frantically, not loudly. With the same steady patience she brought to a failing engine or a drought-stressed field, one step at a time, making sure each piece was in its place before she needed it. The district court confirmed the covenant's enforceability in a ruling that took 11 minutes to read aloud. Meridian's counsel filed a notice of appeal that same afternoon. 3 weeks later, they withdrew it. The development plan for the Valley Corridor was restructured. The Voss parcels were not part of it. On the morning after the withdrawal was filed, Nora drove the old diesel truck out to the north field before the light had fully settled. She parked at the edge of the post oak shade and sat for a moment with the engine off. The fields were in their autumn rest, pale stubble stretching south toward the drainage creek, the soil dark and resting and indifferent to all the proceedings that had been conducted on its behalf. She got out of the truck and walked to Edmund's stone. She pulled the grass back from the base of it with her bare hands, the same way she always did, working carefully around the edges until the ground was clean and the stone stood clear. She did not speak. She had nothing new to tell him. The land was still the land. The promise had held. She straightened up and looked south. 903 acres of working ground, debt-free and intact, running all the way to the tree line. She had not done it for recognition. She had not done it for money. Well, she had done it because her grandfather had handed her something real and asked her, in his quiet way, not to let the world mistake it for something disposable. She walked back to the truck. She had a tractor carburetor to finish by noon. The fields breathed around her. The sky carried the smell of rain still coming. It always did out here, and she knew by now how to read the difference between rain that threatens and rain that arrives. This one was arriving. She could feel it in the clay. She rolled up the truck window and drove slowly down the fence-line road toward the equipment shed, and behind her the post oak stood exactly where it had always stood, and the stone was clean, and the land was still. Some victories do not arrive with sound. They arrive the way first light does, quietly, without announcement, filling the spaces that were dark before. Nora Voss had understood that since she was 9 years old on a wooden crate, listening to an engine tell her the truth, the system had moved against her with briefcases and printed summaries and the confidence of money in a press suit. And she had answered with 60 years of recorded patience, a ledger no one thought to look for, and 14 months of quiet preparation that looked to everyone watching like a woman who fixed old tractors for fun. That was the point. That had always been the point. Now, elsewhere in this country, in a different kind of silence, there is a different kind of ledger. An old grain cooperative in the High Plains, a sealed storage record from 1971, a promise made between two families over a shared harvest, written on the back of a supply receipt and kept in a rusted tin box that has sat undisturbed on a basement shelf for half a century. A regional agribusiness firm recently filed a consolidation claim on the cooperative's final active holding. The family that received the promise has one living member who remembers it. She has not spoken publicly. She has made no objection, but 3 weeks ago she walked into a county archive office and asked for a certified reproduction of a document filed under a number she read from a slip of paper she had kept in her wallet for 40 years. What she found in that archive and what she plans to do with it is a story of its own. Stay with us.